I have a 10-year-old son who is an asthmatic and suffers allergies, and I sort of tend to know when those peaks are coming. What I don't understand, and he has a respiratory specialist and everything else, is that when you take your medication, who then decides if it's time to, stop that medication?
Basically, if someone is having asthma symptoms frequently, they need to be on a preventer. So we look at symptoms, we look at early morning symptoms, waking up at night with symptoms, and symptoms during daily activity. And we also look at the lung function to see if that's normal. Now, if he's gone prolonged periods of time with no symptoms, normal lung function, then it's very reasonable to give a trial of preventer therapy to see how he goes, and then monitor the use of the reliever like Ventolin to see how often that's required. Obviously, if he's someone, for instance, with pollen allergy and he comes into spring, he gets a lot worse, you're going to preempt that and put him on his preventer for that sort of 3 to 4 months. So it is individual, and they're basically the measures that we use: symptoms and lung function, and how often problems are occurring. If he's having high levels of trigger exposure, he's likely to react. Now, if you've had access from an allergy point of view and the allergen's been dealt with, there are ways of dealing with that to try and reduce the amount he's exposed to, or in certain circumstances using techniques such as immunotherapy to make him less sensitive to the allergens. These are other things that one would employ. You mentioned nasal treatment, and I would like to stress that that's really important. 80 to 90% of young children and teenagers with asthma have significant allergic rhinitis, or what's called hay fever, and that must be treated. If it isn't well controlled, then the asthma won't be well controlled, and that's the part that I often find is overlooked. Sometimes kids hate using nasal sprays, or it's just not even asked about. So the upper airway needs to be well managed too, because it usually suffers from the same form of inflammation when it's an allergic basis.